Good morning, good afternoon, and evening, baseball fans, and welcome back to the Barstool Baseball Show. It is Carl, and I am joined by Chris Klemmer, and soon to be joined by Hal Morris for a very special conversation. Before we get to Hal, though, Chris, I got to ask, how you doing? You look great. Another collared shirt.
Yeah, doing all right. Just trying to pick the right games. This is gonna come after, but my bet's play the White Sox for a couple games here. We got Carlos Carrasco on the mound, so I'm just trying to not get too down, trying to stay positive. And at this point in the season, I'm just enjoying baseball.
We're gonna get to Hal Morris in a minute. Right now, though, I'm curious. You lost a bet. You seemed mad today online.
Yeah, I was cranky. 18-8 now, which is still a good percentage. I'm still happy, but I take these losses personally. Like, I get mad. Like, I yell, I swear, I get very angry. I don't like to lose. I feel it's almost like when I lose a bet, it's like personal attack on my intelligence. I take it very personally. I get very upset.
So that's a good thing to tell. So as somebody who tells you, like, that's a good thing. That's why I like telling you, because it's not just like, we'll get them tomorrow, boys. It's not like, oh, shucks, that's the way the game goes. Like, you really take it personal. And that's interesting because I said Hal Morris a couple times. He is a 3-time All-Star, World Series champion on the 1983 Michigan World Series team with Barry Larkin and Chris Sabo. He's considered one of the greatest minds in pro scouting, nearly 4 or 5 decades in baseball, however long we got to get going on this. We're going to talk to him for like 45 minutes about stuff that's going on with the 2023 Reds, player development, different infrastructure stuff. A very interesting conversation. But one thing he talks about, Klemmer, is that when you're looking at an amateur player, you want to find guys that care. When you're looking at a professional player and you're trying to figure out if we sign or trade, or is this a good addition to the clubhouse, we want to find guys that care more than the paycheck or care more. That's you when it comes to gambling. You care more. It's about the integrity and the championships.
For me, the gambling thing is about like work. I just put like 2 hours, 3 hours into this pick. Like, if it doesn't hit, it's like, what the fuck? I get very upset. It's true. I love this conversation we had with Hal. This is awesome. The guys, we talk about everyone from Don Mattingly to Graham Ashcraft. Like, that is the span of this guy's career. Like, it is wild. So if you love baseball, whether it be 80s, 90s, 21st century baseball, it's all here for you. I enjoyed the hell out of this conversation.
Absolutely. So I'm going to do just some like pre-back just so people know. Like I said, 1983, Michigan, played with Barry Larkin and Sabo, drafted, I think 86, he said, right up to the Yankees in 88. We talk about the blockage with Mattingly. He had played a ton with the Reds, 3 All-Star appearances. He's a career 304 hitter. In his prime, ages 25 to 31, he hit 310 with a 370 on base and a 460 slug and a 121 OPS plus. He's a natural-born hitter. And then after the game, he got out, scouting director. And now, as we talk about towards the end of the interview, what he does is invest in Major League Baseball players and NBA players and buys rights to future contracts. Because in his free time, he got an MBA from fucking Stanford. So, amazing career in the game, outside of the game, working around the game. Lucky enough to sit down with us because we're going to talk about the 2023 Reds and then just a great spin-off conversation. When we started doing these shows, this is the type of stuff I get passionate about. I really do. I love arguing with you guys on Monday, but this shit's awesome.
The guy hit 340 as a rookie with the Reds the year they won a World Series. Like, the year before, the 89 Reds were a lousy team. Now, there's the Pete Rose, there's a lot of shit going on with them. Comes to the Reds in 1990, and they sweep the A's to win the World Series. You have that great bullpen, but a big reason why they had that improvement was Hal Morris. Like, check out that rookie year he had. It's sick. And just a really interesting, I love talking to guys like Hal Morris who had these interesting careers. Talk to a superstar, great. But, like, I like having these guys that had to, like, work at it. I'm not saying superstars don't work, but it was never easy for Hal Morris. But yet he had some amazing abilities and made the most of them and had this really nice long career. I don't know. I love shit like this.
Well said. Well said. I love it too, and I'm excited to show everybody this conversation. So let's just get into it. Here's Hal Morris. All right, we're in the interview portion of today's show, and we are joined by World Series champion and Big Ten legend Hal Morris. And off the top, Hal, I got to know, I've heard you say this before in interviews. We've talked about it before in person. said Barry Larkin's the greatest athlete you've ever been around, and I'm curious, what was that first moment when you were like, holy shit, Barry Larkin is not a real baseball player?
Well, I grew up in Northwest Indiana in a town called Munster, and my dad and I were kind of clueless about college baseball and college sports in general. So we decided to follow my senior year of high school to drive up to Ann Arbor to watch the team work out and potentially talk to the coach. So we just knew that they had been in the College World Series the year before. So, we knew that they had one of the better teams in the West, and we really liked the school. So we drove up there, and we were sitting in the third base stands right behind the dugout, and they were drilling, and they were out there getting their work in. And I'm sitting there watching these guys in the infield, and they've got a shortstop and a third baseman, and I'm watching this guy at short, and I look at my dad. I turned to him. I said, Dad, I don't know if I could play the Big Ten. This is pretty good baseball. Well, it was Barry Larkin and Chris Sabo, and to see Barry at that age, to see his feet, until you've seen someone like that up close and personal, you just can't appreciate, just how fast their motions and their feet, their hands, everything, and I was talking to Brett Boone a couple weeks ago when he was discussing, we used to play basketball in the offseason. We all lived in Orlando. And he said he still can't get over like how quick Barry was in a basketball court. He's like a cat. He was an extraordinary athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say quick how, like, I want to just myself. I'm Chris. You made me very upset when I was 10 years old. So I was watching the World Series and Ricky Henderson, my favorite player. And you guys just swept the shit out of the A's. And I was a very mad 10-year-old. I just want you to know that you made me very upset when you won that World Series. Just a heads up on that. But I have a question for you. I think I had at least your playing career, like an ideal career. You lifetime 304 hitter. You win a World Series. You have over 1,000 hits. You have a great hitting streak. You have all these, but yet you're not Barry Larkin. You have to deal with all you can. I'm sure. Go to the grocery store and be okay and not have to deal with that. You have all these cool accomplishments. I think that's the perfect, ideal career.
Well, you know what, Chris? Playing in Cincinnati, you could go about your business and people left you alone for the most part. Now, when the guys that played in New York, the guys that played for the Braves, that played for the Cubs back in the 90s, they were on WGN and TBS. People knew who they were. But they didn't know a whole lot about us. So that made our lives a lot easier, I think.
I bet.
And as we were talking before the show, I wanted to have you on because of the 2023 Reds have made this amazing run into the national spotlight. When you and I had first crossed paths, you were introducing me to Graham Ashcraft and saying, that's Nick Lodolo over there. And, Tyler Stevenson they got a good thing coming. And I'm telling you, and I was kind of, I was giggling. We had our nice conversation about the Big Ten. And now I'm looking back a couple months. So that was in February. So from February to now, give the Reds the 2023 honest score 1 to 10 on the surprise scale. How surprised are you with the fact that they're competing? Because I know they're competitive and you like the makeup, but the fact that they've really become a national story, how surprised are you with this?
Well, you know what? I went to the Reds fantasy camp last year, and Lenny Harris was there, and Lenny does development. He's a coach in the Red system. He said, Hal, we got some dudes on the way. And Barry had told me the same thing, and Eric Davis. They said we really got some players coming. So I don't think it's a surprise to the guys that are real familiar with that organization. You look at who's they brought up this year. Steer is an everyday player. Friedel has done a great job in center field. They really haven't had a center fielder there for a while, and he's a good defensive center fielder. Dela Cruz is a future Hall of Famer. McLean is going to be an all-star. Abbott is going to be an all-star. And to have, 5-6 players like that hit in 1 year, just following Hunter Green and Lodolo. Ashcraft got off to a good start. It's been a little bit rocky since then. but he's got a good arm. Diaz has been great in the bullpen. They really, it's been a lean, 9-10 years down there, but they've done a very good job drafting, and their development is outstanding. So, I think the guys that have really looked at that system are not terribly surprised that they played as well as they have. I mean, they've got I don't think anyone in baseball has better young players than they do.
I feel like we've seen a huge shift just in the last couple of years. You had the Orioles make the same kind of jump last year. I feel like you guys are making that jump this year. And it's all done like organizationally. So like it's all done with not like so I'm a Mets fan. We go out, we'll spend $360 million and, we're 7 games under 500. So, but I feel like with the Orioles and you guys this year, it's all done from, work and effort, just having some of these losing seasons, getting these high draft picks, just a strong organizational mix as far as bringing up the right players, having the right system, growing guys slowly. Like none of the guys you brought up, maybe the exception of De La Cruz, is super young. I don't mean like, they're all like 23, 24 because they've been in your system, they've learned, and they're playing, I'm sure, kind of like that red style of ball I'm going to play. That's very encouraging as a baseball fan to see organizations kind of do it the right way.
Well, it takes some discipline at the ownership level. It really does, because, when you go to an owner and say, hey, it's going to be a 3 or 4 year, 5 year project, you hope that they're patient. You hope that you let they let it run its course. That's not always the case, and it's not always the case that the guys you draft end up, turning into what you thought they were going to become. But you have to give those young guys the runway. You got to give them the opportunity to go out there and play. And I've got to give the ownership down there in Cincinnati a lot of credit. They've done that. They again had some lean years, but they tried to reassure people that, hey, like these kids are coming and they're showing up. And they brought up a guy last night, Encarnacion Strand, who he's like got a 323 minor league average, and I don't know, like 23. But it's if you get like that in the minor leagues, it's typically you're going to swing the bat pretty well in the big leagues. So they've got another one. When you're playing in a smaller market, I think the fans have more patience. The Mets, not necessarily. I was drafted by the Yankees, and the Yankees, there was no such thing as, and there is no such thing as rebuilding New York. You retool over the winter, and that's the case with the Mets too. And sometimes that's easier said than done. You throw a bunch of new personalities into a clubhouse, you expect magic. It's not that easy. But that's, if there is a benefit to being in a smaller market, it's that I think that, you do get a little bit more patience from the people and, in those cities.
I want to talk about like structures of baseball operations, but you just brought up magic, and I can't pass magic because Klemmer and I talk about this a lot. As a former Big Ten walk-on who believes in the magic of baseball, Klemmer's more of a back of the baseball card historian, hard in your face, argumentative guy. Like, can you just explain simply in your terms, like, A, do you believe in the baseball gods, and what is baseball magic to you?
Well, I do believe in chemistry, and I do believe in guys liking to come to the ballpark, liking their teammates, liking be out in the dugout, liking to go out to dinner. And since when I played for the Reds, we had pretty good teams over the course of a decade, and we had a very flat clubhouse. And in the sense that we had great players and Barry Larkin and Eric Davis, but they were, I will say this about Barry: the only thing Barry was concerned about was winning, and that is the truth. He was very unusual in that sense. A lot of times, the real big superstars, they're kind of on their own program, and it's okay if you win. If you lose, they're not going to really sweat it. That was not the case with Barry. And we were very tight. And it's funny, I think back about it. I think one of the reasons at Riverfront Stadium, we didn't have a bullpen. So basically everyone sat on the bench together. So all the relievers and the starters, we were all there interacting. We got to know each other real well. And I never really thought about it until I later played in Kansas City and Detroit. And then I was sitting there one day and I realized, man, I haven't seen this guy for about 5 hours, however long it was. They were out in the bullpen, but that was part of it. But we also had a a very cohesive group. And I think that's when you can create, culture is a very big thing. And I think you can overperform your ability at times. And on the flip side, if you have a group of guys, when I went to the Tigers, the starting pitchers sat over there together, the relievers, there were these factions. It was very striated. And I did not enjoy coming to the clubhouse. I don't know if anyone enjoyed coming to the clubhouse. And I can't help but think that affected the performance on the field.
And I've been saying along the way, slowly but surely, that I sense that with this Reds club, that there is that bond that they want to be there, play hard for each other. I do want to get away, though, for the Reds for a second, because you have such a unique perspective as a player in front offices, as an academic, like baseball lifer. Can you explain to me, Klemmer, the simpler minds in baseball, like the baseball operations side of an organization, and the general manager, and you've got scouting and player development and pro scouting and pro player development. Could you just like break that triangle down, or the pyramid down, or the hierarchy down in simple terms for baseball fans? Because I don't know if that's something that we all understand like conclusively.
Sure. So with a major league club, you have the business operations, and then you have the baseball operations. And the baseball operations are responsible for putting the product out there on the field. The business side, they tell you how much money you could spend, essentially. But then they hopefully they leave everything to order the baseball operations. Now, the baseball operations, basically, you have the front office there with your general manager and your assistant GMs, and the silos that's underneath that front office are player development and then scouting. On the scouting side, the scouting basically breaks up into three smaller silos: international scouting, amateur scouting, and professional scouting. So the international scouting, that's where they're looking to evaluate players that they're going to sign in every year in the international market. They can start signing players when they're 16 years old. Okay, so you see these guys. Your international markets are going to be in Venezuela, Dominican. You're going to have a scout in Australia, maybe in the Far East, and Japan, Korea. They're out there evaluating amateur international players. The amateur scouts, they are scouting high school players, junior college, and college players. And occasionally someone pops up that's a free, that doesn't live in that bucket. But that's what the amateur scouts do. The pro scouts, they're out scouting anyone who plays professionally. So the minor leagues, big league players, foreign, professionals, Korea, Japan, those leagues. When I worked for the Angels, I was the director of professional scouting. So I oversaw my team. We covered all the minor leagues, big league, and then the foreign professionals. So that's scouting. Player development, those are the coaches and the managers, and the trainers. They're the guys that are working hands-on with the players. With some organizations, there's not a lot of interaction between the scouting silo and the player development silo. The scouts, they scout, draft the player, sign them, and get them to the development guide to develop. So on the development side, you got your pitching guys, your hitting instructors, and then the managers that run the teams, and that's essentially it. You have guys on the pitching and the hitting side that go throughout the organization and try to provide continuity in what's going on there. So that's kind of the breakdown with the baseball operation side. You got the group there in whatever city it is, and the one group I didn't really discuss. You know how big quant teams with these different organizations. Well, they've got the analysts who are building models. They're crunching all the data from StatCast They're very sophisticated. And those teams are getting bigger and bigger, especially with teams like the Mets and Yankees, the large market teams. And that's an input that a general manager will use when he's making decisions. He's going to talk to his scouts, his scouting director. He's going to talk to his quant guys, and that's kind of what goes on when they're deciding who to draft and who to trade for, who to sign as a free agent.
Now, when you were playing in the '90s, when I was growing up, analytics weren't a huge part of the game. At least to the level it is now. So that's probably, I think, the biggest change from the '90s to now is just how increased statistical analysis, things like that. Do you like that? Are you a fan of the increased analysis and kind of how things are measured now as opposed to how they were back when you were playing?
It's funny, Chris. I think about that a lot. Like, how would I use this information that they have available now? Would I have used that when I was playing? I'm sure I would have to a certain degree. How much, I don't know. It's a very end in my career, you're starting to see that data starting to kind of, infiltrate the game. So I remember looking at breakdowns of, how often a guy threw a certain pitch, 1-1, 1-2, whatever it was. And I'd be up there at the plate. Okay, he's 1-1, he's throwing a changeup 55% of the time, fastball, slider. And I started thinking about this, and I did this for a couple of weeks, and I decided, I'm overthinking things. I like see the ball and hit the ball. And, when I was in Anaheim, Mike Trout did not Mike didn't use a lot of the information, when we were there. And it was interesting. There was a friction between the front office and the guys in the clubhouse because, we'd send down an advance report for, whoever we were going to be playing. And it's 100 pages long. I mean, very sophisticated analysis. And then the coaches are like, hey, we don't want to burden these guys. We don't want to overwhelm them with this information. So it's still a friction in the game, and everyone's still trying to figure out how to use it. Where I think it's pretty interesting with the pitchers, like what they're able to do now with all of the they have these edgertronic cameras where they can break down. It's like 1/1000th of a second where they can see exactly what's going out to release point, the spin efficiencies, and they are kind of crafting pitches, based upon their release point and the spins. That to me is what's really where I see a dramatic change is how it's affecting the development of pitching. The hitters, I haven't been terribly impressed with what it's done with the hitters, to be honest with you. The pitchers, yes.
Now, do you think there's a chance that not a sixth tool, but there's some sort of benchmark to evaluate amateur players as to how adept they are at adapting their game or taking on this information? Like, are organizations at the point where they're valuing this and they look at a kid and say, well, he's coming from Vanderbilt, so we know that he's already plugged into a development system?
You know what? That's one of the biggest challenges when you're scouting amateurs is, trying to figure out what kind of makeup they have. And that includes how are they going to be able to process information? How coachable are they going to be? How adaptable are they going to be? A lot of times, the agents like to kind of keep the players off limits to the scouts and to the teams because they feel like that could be used against their guys, So it's pretty tricky, as you try to get in there and talk to the players when you're an amateur scout, but it's challenging. It's very challenging because my experience, the guys that can, utilize this information and make it actionable, they really can separate themselves from their peers. But it's hard to gauge that. Very hard.
I have a question about what it's like to be in the minor leagues a little bit. So, you came up with the Yankees, and you were blocked by Don Mattingly for a couple of years. Like, you probably should have been in the majors a year or two earlier, like regular playing. And you proved that in 1990. You had that great year, obviously. What is that like as a minor leaguer to be down there and being in AAA, and it's just so frustrating knowing that you have the talent and abilities to be in the major leagues, but because of no fault of your own, and really no fault of the team's own, you're not there. What is that like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, in my circumstance, I was drafted in 1986, and I had some good breaks. I was able to move through the system pretty quickly. And I got to the big leagues in 1988, and it was a good experience for me for this reason. I got up there, and I was able to watch Don Mattingly, to watch him work every day, to watch these guys. And I honestly, because I remember calling my dad, and I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm not good enough to be playing right now." I said, I don't work hard. I thought I worked hard. I said, Mattingly works a lot harder than I do. He's strong. These guys are stronger than me. This is a different game up here. So in a sense, and you'll see this with young players where they come up a little bit, and the big leagues is a different game. I remember when I first got traded to Cincinnati, I was talking to Eric Davis. He said, "Kid, let me tell you something." He said, "There are no superstars from AAA."
Good point.
And he's true though. He's absolutely right about that. It's a different game in the big leagues. So I didn't experience that frustration. Had I had to stay in New York another year, in 1989, I went back after the 88 season, and I really trained differently, and I worked differently, and I worked on my hitting, and I knew I was ready in '89. But had I had to stay another year, it would have been extraordinarily frustrating. Fortunately, at that time, George was trading anyone and everyone. If you look at who the Yankees traded, in '88, I was in Rochester, and Jay Buhner was my roommate, and he gets a call. He's like, "Al, I'm going to Seattle." They were moving guys left and right. So he didn't stick around long there. Being in New York was good in that sense.
So you talked about Jay Buhner as your roommate, and I know there's a story you've told about, like, you hear Jay Buhner hit, and you don't need to hear anybody else hit. Like, I kind of understand that concept, I should say, as a baseball guy, but can you elaborate on what that means? Like, what is it when you say, like, the sound? Are there a couple guys, or what that really means?
Sure. Everyone looks at exit velocity now, in terms of how hard guys hit balls. It used to be you hear the difference in the sound of the ball coming off the bat. And in Jay's case, I think that's what the story, Carl. My first big league spring training, the Yankees were in Fort Lauderdale, and we had a cage right off of the dugout right next to the clubhouse. And I had never seen Jay hit, and I didn't know a ton about it. And I walked down there the first day Jay was hitting, and it was an enclosed area, and Jay had extraordinary power to right center. And Carl, he said these balls, and it was so loud. It made a different sound than anyone else who was in there hitting. Literally, dude, when some of these guys hit, it hurts your ears. It's so loud. And Jay was one of them.
Can I stay on the subjective component for a second? Because, like, I like your perspective outside of what StatCast has to offer. So let's pretend Klemmer's a top prospect. Chris Klemmer here is
33.
Yeah, but like right now you're
sad one. It's a sad draft.
You're 17 years old, high school kid. We'll say big right fielder, huge arm.
All right.
What's the red light and what's the green light if you were to go? Not talk to them. You don't need to know the parents, but just like the second you show up to the field, like what are your red lights and what are your green lights with Klemmer?
Well, with the 17, the amateur guys, hopefully, before the season even starts, I get a chance to watch them play basketball or play another sport. When I was an amateur scout for 2 years. And the second year I was living in Palo Alto, California, and Jock Peterson was at Palo Alto High. And I got to go see Jock play basketball. And Jock was also a great wide receiver. So if I could see play basketball, one of the things that's really hard to quantify is athleticism, fluidity. With athletes, you want to draft athletes. And clubs, they get in the habit of really drilling down into like the numbers, what they do. And they have this all broken down, Carl, so that this is what it looks like in the Big Ten, the SEC. They have all this stuff normalized, but you have to draft athletes because those are the guys that have the ability to learn, to improve, both on the mound and off the position players too. But if I get there, again, I'm looking at the fluidity of your actions, and then I want to really, I'm watching you hit. That's a big thing. I'm going to evaluate your swing and see if there's anything that I think's fatal in there. Any big problem. if you spin a great deal, if your hips fly open, that's a really hard thing to fix, and certain guys, you could just see that they have an innate ability to manipulate the barrel of the bat. They just can handle the bat. The really good hitters, they kind of jump off at the pace. They jump out at you. That you walk out, you're like, wow, this guy can really hit. And then if you start to see someone face decent pitching, like how are they tracking balls? Can they see spin at all? And it's a real challenge. Like right now, speak back to the Reds, Will Benson's there. Okay. And in 2016, I was again working for the Angels as their pro director, but Billy Epler was the GM. He said, Hal, could you go watch some amateur guys for me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I love going to watch the amateur players. Getting to watch those high school kids is so much fun. But he sent me down to Atlanta, and over the course of 3 days, I saw Brandon Marsh, Will Benson, and Josh Lowe. so Atlanta, but Will Benson, he swung and missed at some pitches, and there was a big debate about, hey, he's swinging and missing, and how's that going to project? But he's extraordinarily athletic. We had signed to play basketball at Duke,
Wow.
So we're having these debates about this, and it's a tough call. And I'm not, sometimes, you try to make the best decision you can. But Will Benson's a guy that he's done very well since he's come to Cincinnati. He's continuing to adjust and adapt. So that's those are some of the things you look at there, Carl.
So then, I just want to take Klemmer and now just say he's been to the big leagues. He's succeeded. He's hit free agency now. Now he's a big name in you're willing to spend a ton of money on him. What are those red flags, green lights then as the pro scouting evolution goes from the amateur to the pro?
Well, first of all, the first question I have is why did his club lock him up? If you look at the performance, Carl, the guys that are extended perform better than the free agents. And why is that? Because the clubs have better information than anyone else. They're going to sign the guys with our conversation earlier, the guys that can process information well, the guys, that show up to play every day and really are intrinsically motivated. They're not motivated by the money. The teams know that. So that's the first question. Like, okay, and now there's some agents that don't let their guys sign extensions for the most part. They're going to insist their guys get to free agency. That could be a big part of it. But I want to know, what kind of guy is Chris? Is he good to the clubhouse attendant? Do the clubbies like him? Because if the clubbies like him, that means your teammates are going to like him. That's one thing that we always try to do. You get the best information about any players in the league, not from the coaches, but from the clubbies. Do they treat the guys well? Do they treat the bat boys well? Do they treat their teammates well? And that's where I would want to start. Because if they don't, then they better be extraordinarily talented, or I wouldn't want them in my clubhouse.
All right, so this time of year is right around trade deadline time, and I imagine it would be a busy time for scouts and for people in player personnel, and especially like with the Reds. So the Reds have a clear Achilles heel, is that starting pitching. That's easily the weakness of that team. You look at the relief, very good. The offense is very good. So when you're in that position, like with the Reds, like what are you looking at? Like how are you as a scout? Do you not want to lose your prospects that you nurtured for years? Are you giving reports to the GM who has to make that final call? Like what is that like the last 2 weeks to be heading to the deadline?
Well, I tell you what, from a player's perspective, we wanted help. Like if we thought we could win. And we were, this happened a few times in my career in Cincinnati. Listen, we would have this debate like, hey, you get us a starting pitcher, we could win. And the debate always is you build an organization, and when you have a chance to win, like the Reds right now, what do? Now it's a little different these days because it's a lot easier to get into the playoffs, much harder to win it. So you have to be a little bit more guarded about your prospects. But from the club's perspective, you canvass the market, what's out there, what's it going to cost me, and sometimes if teams are getting aggressive, you might not be able to get the starting pitching you want, so you might have to go and add to your bullpen, so maybe you end up adding two arms to the pen. Diaz has been fantastic down there, I think the rest of the pen has probably outperformed a little bit, so they might want to add an arm. And maybe, who knows? Maybe you get a guy like Josh Hader. You talk to Diaz and say, listen, we're going to bring Hader in here. When you guys, we're gonna use you depending upon the game situation. Josh will be here, and he's a free agent in a couple of months, so don't let this bother you. That you might go with that route, right? But Lodolo, Green, they think they'll be back. And frankly, like I said, Abbott's a frontline guy. You could go into the playoff series with those three guys and really cause some problems. So if they're confident that that those the Lodolo and Green are going to be back and they're going to be healthy, maybe they add to their bullpen. Because you can throw Ashcraft in the pen in a playoff series if you need a couple, 2 or 3 innings from someone.
Do scouts get mad when prospects get traded? Like if there is a prospect that let's say you really like, and you do kind of a deal, heading to the deadline. Do you ever heard of scouts getting upset? Like, I cannot believe you traded X, Y, and Z.
I don't think so. I think it's not. If they were responsive, if they were involved in drafting that player, I think it's a feather in their cap, because someone wanted them, and you're hope for the players that they play in the big league somewhere, and oftentimes, they're just not a good fit in the organization. So whatever you can do to add a piece, and the scouts ultimately they want a ring. Because those rings are so big now, the scouts they like to take them out to the ballpark once in a while. But
I have a couple of just small nuggets here I'd be interested in your takes on. So you've talked about David Wells as being a legendary teammate. Would you mind just offering up as a classic David Wells stories for the youngsters that don't understand?
Well, well,
you can go rated R this podcast. It's okay.
Okay, well, so he was telling me a story about he was pitching up in Toronto, and I think Doug Brocail told me a story about Boomer. He said they're playing a day game up in Toronto, and he said Boomer is he's really laboring out there. He going behind the mound and taking his head up and wiping his forehead like this. He's just really trying to slow things down. And he said he Brocail. I think David threw 6 innings. They win the game. I think he got a win. And Brocail sees him after the game and says, "Hey, yeah, it looked like you were really struggled a little bit." He said, did you go out last night? And he said, "No, but shit, I must have drank 5 or 6 beers over the course of that game, And he was out here throwing, So anyhow, listen, these things happen. I don't know about these days, but back then, guys would drink. Sometimes guys, they would slam a beer if they were in a slump right before they went out there on the field just to relax themselves a little bit. So anyhow,
I want to say and the other one from that era would be, was Sean Casey nicer or was Paul O'Neill more competitive?
Listen, that's a tough call. Sean is just the nicest guy. What you see, what's your perception of it? Some guys you think there's no way that guy is that good of a guy. He must be full of shit. But like with Sean, you're like, what you see is what you get. He's the nicest guy. And when he first came to Cincinnati, I re-signed with him, so I was kind of Sean's backup. And there was zero. Here we are, 2 first base. You might think that there's some friction. Not at all. I had the best time with him, and he made me so comfortable being there with him. But Paul was extraordinarily competitive, as you saw, especially in New York. And getting back to athleticism, Paul, he used to beat most of the teaching pros in tennis in Cincinnati. He'd beat them all. I mean, he was that good a tennis player, and I think Paul could have played in the NBA. We would play these basketball games in the winter, and Paul's 6'5", he could shoot. Like I was looking at him like, man, he could have been a shooting guard. So Paul was a hell of a man, but is fiercely competitive, boy.
I asked Butch Hobson this, the old manager of the Red Sox, and I was like, who's the best player you ever managed? Like, who is, and not the greatest talent. He's like, that's Roger Clemens. But who's the best guy you've ever managed, teammate-wise? And he said it was Todd Pratt when he was in AAA with the Phillies. He just said Todd Pratt was just like an amazing teammate, just like the best guy to have in a clubhouse. I don't know, like, who is not the most talented, that's obviously probably Arkin, but who is the best guy to have in the clubhouse?
Well, I was only there, half a year, but Don Mattingly was he was so good to me, and I thought he was such a great leader of the Yankees. As I mentioned, I'm from Indiana. Don's from Southern Indiana, and I came up and I asked him about my hit day, and he comes out there and he's watching me take batting practice. And so typically, when you're at home, the extras hit early, and then eventually the big boys come out there. They don't want them standing out in the field because you're going to get tired. So, but Don came out there probably like 40 minutes before he had to be on the field to hit and watch me hit. And as I got older, and I thought about everything, how nice he was to me, and like how much he tried to help me with my hitting. I'm like, he was unbelievable. But he commanded the respect of everyone in that clubhouse. And this is when the Yankees were loaded with, Winfield, Ricky Henderson, Dave Righetti, Ron Guidry, Tommy John, John Candelaria. I mean, these guys, it was an all-star cast of players, but Don was the guy that they all looked to, because he had so much dignity and class. I mean, he personified, I think, what it meant to be a Yankee.
To the modern game, obviously the big story here in today's game right now is whether or not Ohtani gets traded. And I'm more interested, Hal, and this is my last like big, juicy, meaty question for you, tapping into your baseball brain. It's such a common narrative to be like negative towards the Angels and to say they've wasted 6 years of Ohtani's career. Can you offer up any devil's advocate insight as to why the last 6 years to help baseball fans understand, well, consider this. I know they have Trout. I know they have Ohtani. I know they spent a ton of money on Rendon, but here's something, you guys, what are the things we don't know?
Well, Mike's been banged up the last couple of years. Mike is worth 3 players when he's healthy, and he's such a special player. Having him hurt is a huge blow, because he takes up so much of the payroll. His presence in the lineup. I would say, we were discussing the Reds and how well they drafted and how well they developed. It's been a little bit of a dry spell, there in Anaheim, and they just. I don't think that their drafts have worked out for them the way they would have liked them to work out. They produced some players, but not the impact I think that they thought they were going to develop. And it's you have to have you got to have young guys percolating. And one of the reasons, like you said, the Reds are so exciting to watch. You got to have young guys on your club. These they give the team energy. They're hungry. Danny Jackson said, "Listen, you run for the money, then you run with it." And once there's that transition in the clubhouse, the guys don't have that same kind of edge, that same hunger. That's why competition's good. When your young guys are coming up behind you, and that you're going to have a little bit more spring in your step, and I haven't seen that out there.
Are there a couple of young guys we should keep an eye out for right now across the league?
Let me think here. Like I said, these guys in Cincinnati, De La Cruz, Abbott, McLean, these guys are all future all-stars. I'm trying to think who else that I've seen here that are listen, I think Christopher Morel is exciting to watch at the plate. I tell you what, he can buggy whip the ball, boy. He's got some. I like watching him hit. I think as he gets older and he calms down, he gets a little bit more selective at the plate. Who else? comes to mind here.
How about my guy Alvarez of the Mets? I think he's a really exciting guy to watch, especially from his power perspective.
He's an interesting player, absolutely. Swings the bat, he's got a swagger about him. The shortstop in Anaheim, Vito, I think, is a good player. I think that's there very quick, and the guys who get up there in their first full season, those are the guys to keep an eye on. They're going to be special players.
Hal, I want to thank you so much for jumping on. It's so easy to just talk baseball back and forth with you. We could go seemingly all day.
I enjoyed chatting. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it a bunch. That was awesome. I always love taking those time machines back to the 90s a little bit and talking some of this, this little 90s baseball. Just that nothing warms my heart more.
I enjoyed myself.
And just so I don't have to go back and clear up the introduction, how do I explain what you do now?
So what we do, I work for a fund, and we acquire equity interests in professional athletes. So we pay them, and then we gain rights a percentage of their future earnings stream.
So if a guy's in the minor leagues and he's having a tough time paying bills, but he has maybe a bright future, you're like, hey, we'll give you X amount of money, but then we now get Y% of your future earnings.
We typically work with big league players, Chris, and now some NBA guys. So we typically wait till they're playing in the big leagues. So and that's why I still get it to evaluate guys. So that's still my job, is scouting players. So it's a lot of fun for me.
So so they're going to be like, hey, we don't want to invest in someone that maybe doesn't have the brightest future. But if you come in there and be like, hey, this guy projects to do really well over the next 5, 10, 15 years, that's a better investment for your firm.
Hopefully. But again, everyone assumes that there's going to be this linear projection of players, but guys get hurt, life happens, their situation changes, all kinds of things happen. You can't predict. But that's certainly our hope with anyone we work with.
Hey, I actually this is the last thing. I need you to say something nice about Billy Epler. We have a lot of Mets fans that are listening, especially one in the middle of this that are tortured. So, the guy close. He hired you. Say something nice about him.
Billy is a great guy. He has a larger than life personality, and he's going to do well. It just takes some time. Again, there's a lot of pressure again with the Mets. The Yankees trying to rebuild over the course of winter, and sometimes the puzzle pieces just aren't there to put it together. Guys get injured, what have you. But he'll do well given the opportunity.
Guys, this is Hal Morris. Thanks so much for jumping on. I'm sure we're going to talk again down the road. Good luck to the Cincinnati Reds, and we'll talk soon, Hal. Thank you very much.
Thanks. See you.
That's Hal Morris, huge friend of the program, great baseball mind. Can't thank him enough. My favorite part is when he had basically proved what I said correct, that chemistry matters, loving your teammates matter.
He also noticed how he did not even justify the baseball gods bullshit, that weird fucking romantic useless comment. Remember that? Remember the mirror of baseball gods? Yeah.
I had asked him if he believed in the baseball gods. He
Missed it.
Maybe missed it. Yeah, he was too busy caught up in the chemistry because it was such a good thing. We'll ask him next time about the baseball gods. Go fuck yourself. What are the Mets right now? 7 games under.
The Mets stink. I never said anything. I never said the Mets are good. The Mets stink.
I fucked up. I forgot to. I wanted to do it off the top, say something nice about Billy Epler, but I was uncomfortable because we've said on the show he's out, right?
I think he'll just get kicked downstairs. So he'll stay with the team, but it's going to be David Stern's team. That's pretty. Like I said, it's a pretty open secret.
But this is one of those things about baseball where I always question what talent pool are we working here with? Because Billy Epler hired Hal 13 years ago, 14 years ago into the Angels organization, and now he's here at the Mets. It just doesn't seem like they're if Google has to go out, they can just put a job posting and they get the best of the best of the best. Or maybe that's a bad example, but I feel like Major League Baseball is not pulling from a wide pool of people, and I'm using Billy Epler as this reason of me thinking that.
Yeah, I don't know. You see that some of the NFL head coaches, you have kind of that same. Is it just another
Yes.
retread? Or, I mean, I think what happened with Epler was Cohen had 3 people he wanted to hire, one of them being Theo. He got turned down or blocked by all of them. And then he kind of settled for Epler, and he's been kind of waiting for the perfect guy, which for him is David Stearns. But then the Brewers blocked Stearns from going anywhere. So they've been kind of in this purgatory when it comes to like leadership in the baseball side. So Epler's kind of taken over because he had to. I don't think the plan was ever really for Epler to be in charge for this long.
I want to make you a promise right now. I mean this.
Okay.
Do you feel it?
Do I feel what?
The meaningfulness in which I'm about to convey to you. Okay.
Somewhat.
If I ever get in the position to have this controller influence, I will do whatever I can to get you an offer to work for a front office or a baseball team in some sort of strategic capacity. Like I don't mean like picking up napkins after a fucking game in spring training or something, but like say I'm out, Ricketts is like, you know what, Carl? I like the cut of your jib. And I'm like, I got a fucking guy. You're the guy. You have officially become the number one guy.
No, there are guys.
My number one guy. Fuck the guys I know.
Like,
I got a whole Rolodex of them.
You see some of these guys, they've been to Yale and stuff. I'm just a goofy guy from the New Hampshire Technical Institute that loves baseball. Like I the older I get, the more I'm like, all right, like I get my role. You know, I think my role here is kind of fun where I talk baseball with you guys. But I don't know if I have the upstairs to run a team. Those guys are brilliant.
I think a room could use a guy like you. Jed Hoyer and Theo talk about when they were 27, 28, it was like a group of 6, 7 guys, and they would just sit around and brainstorm. That would be, if I could be in any room in baseball history.
That would be fun. That would be a lot of fun. I think I'd be good at the vibes. Like I'd make some funny fart jokes. I'd tell some I'd maybe do impressions of some baseball players. And then maybe I once in a while have like a good idea for a free agent pickup. But that would be the extent of that's my ceiling. A lot of hard jokes.
Well, we're coming off Hal Morris. The interview portion, that's a good interview portion for these shows. We've done a couple of those, and so we're going to try and get a couple more in the future. I suppose as we're wrapping today's show, your brain is on what big series over the next couple days, or is there something you want to draw attention to for casual baseball fans?
I got my eyeballs on the Dodgers. I mean, they got this series right now with the Orioles, so that's pretty gigantic. Both teams like red hot right now. I feel like the Orioles are playing their best baseball of the season. You could even argue, are they peaking too early if you buy into that? And the Dodgers follow that up. They go to Texas to play the Rangers. So like this is quite a week for the Dodgers. So, and I think they're a team that even though they have some starting pitching issues, they are just playing some decent baseball right now. So I'm kind of watching them. I'm very intrigued. And then the other weekend series I'm excited about is Diamondbacks Reds. We talk about, a lot about the Reds. Are they for real? Are they not for real? The Diamondbacks are also kind of like scuffling. I kind of want to see how that all shakes out this weekend. So tons of great baseball. It's so nice having baseball back. All-Star break's over. I was up late last night watching West Coast baseball. Let's go.
This is a good time for people to be very pissed off. This is where people are the second most pissed off they'll be in the baseball season as they get in the trade deadline coming out of the second half. Everybody wants to win every single fucking game that they're playing right now because you've sat around for a week looking at the standings. There's some time. There's some time to get more pissed off. That would be the last 10 days of the season. But right now, this is a very meaty time. Cubs fans are up in arms. Mets fans, your disgust is long come and gone. But the passions are there. The loins are moist. Does that make sense?
No, it's gross.
Moist or loin?
I don't want to hear about your moisty loins. I don't think anyone does.
This is Barstool Baseball. That was Hal Morris. That's Chris Klemmer. I'm Carl. Subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it, especially on YouTube. We will be back on Friday. Until then, see you guys next time.
This week, he talked about his moisty loins. Next week, his sweaty pubes. Mark my words.
I just shaved those babies fucking down to the stud.